I not say no? And am I truly honoring what feels right and fulfilling for me in this moment? Many times I have found myself in a situation where that is not the case. And so my life lessons there are like, pay attention, be present. And when I feel that others might be perceiving me as disingenuous and I might be perceiving me as like inauthentic to what is truly serving me, then it's peel back from that people pleaser, young girl chameleon and think like, who am I? Who do I want to be now? Who do I want to be tomorrow? And not just automatically settle in that autopilot mode that I've been in my whole life, if that makes sense.
So everything you're saying actually 100% resonates with me. And one thing that stood out is the people pleasing aspect of it. And I think as we think through that and we understand, and, I've been a people pleaser. And I think it's come from, I talk about my journey, even in real estate, and I love real estate, come third generation, but a lot of times I said yes to things in real estate from pressure, and not even pressure from my family, pressure from the community, where it was like, well, your family's been doing this, and why wouldn't you do this? And things like that. And, I'm blessed to be able to, because how many Black families can we say you're in third generation, right? My child would be fourth. And those are important things to me, but it's the people pleasing aspect of saying yes. And exactly what you're saying, like not honoring yourself to know that sometimes it should be a no. And I'm still working on my no's. I'm working on that.
Amber, I'm curious to hear, like, as someone who is ambitious and like always, remember a minute ago, we're saying always chasing the next thing, saying that no, it's like, is it more difficult thinking about and gearing up to say the no? Or is it the feeling that you get? Like, do you ever see evidence that the no really didn't serve you? Like, I wonder how you've experienced that.
I think it's more internal, the fear of, if I say no, am I missing out on something? And am I not showing up in a way that people would expect of me? So it goes back to the honoring yourself of, a lot of times you give me something, I know I'm probably at capacity, but I'm going to say yes. And then I'm going to figure out how to do it.
Right.
And, conversations with my friends, et cetera, is like, hey girl, like how much more can you do? And I say, I'll figure it out, because I think individuals like ourselves, it's raw and authentic, but I think that we find success in chaos. Healthy. It's not healthy, but even when you think about procrastination, and we both know how to execute effectively on things, but I still procrastinate. And that's because I can execute more effectively in chaos. And so I think that goes back to saying the no. If I continue to put stuff on my plate, I know I'm going to get it done. But if I have two things that I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, God, I'm bored.
Yeah.
I feel like I should be doing something. And so I think I think that is also a part of being an ambitious and successful woman, that we don't give space for peace. We don't. And so I think that also goes into kind of the second part of the conversation. And I'm excited for this, the intersectionality of relationships itself. Because when you think about being, as I always say, like a boss, like we are, I never made time for relationships. That was the last thing that was on my mind for, most of my 20s and the beginning of my 30s. Like, I was like, a relationship? Who has time for that? Like, I need to get my MBA, and I need to make as much money as I can, and I need to make my parents proud, and all these things. And then I got to like 35 and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about this, right? And so when we think about relationships and that work-life balance conversation, how do you think about creating space for a relationship Or is that something that you yourself as an ambitious woman are still working on?
I hear you talk about how where you ended up, at 35 and looking up and like because of the things that you prioritized. For
Mhm.
me, my version of that is a little different. It's almost like the opposite
Okay.
because I did pursue and achieve, my MBA
Yeah.
very young.
Mhm.
I was like fresh out of undergrad. So
Yeah.
I'm like baby 2022,
Yeah.
23, And at that time, I was still in a mental mindset where
Mhm.
I overly, depended on real like who's the man who is in
Mhm.
my life, who is he, the most popular? Is he in a fraternity?
Yeah.
Is he a football player, basketball player, whatever? And that was kind of also the elitist environment that I was in, having been at the same, school for 6 straight years.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that school has that reputation for that mentality. And
Mhm.
so going through my MBA, it was more so like, well, now I have my MBA. I'm moving to a big metropolitan city like DC. Men will love that.
Mhm.
You see what I mean? It wasn't
Yeah.
like Jessica loves that for her. I did, but I loved it for me because of the pretty package. It's not just that she is
With the bow.
that like
Mhm.
I felt as though, especially when I was younger, and now I think about it less, but I didn't know when I was younger, the package I was presenting was absolutely beautiful, but I shielded a lot of the people that I think I wanted to take to look at me with attraction physically from the other part of me that is an intelligent, like nerd, overachiever,
Yeah.
striving MBA. Like I didn't want them to know that because I always felt like, okay, well, they might feel intimidated, they might not get it. But then when I said, okay, now I'm going to this young professional city, DC, men will love the fact that I am beautiful. And
Mhm.
then just wait till I tell them that
But
I have a master's
yay.
degree,
Right.
and I just, to me, like it's just tough because I spent so much time and energy focusing on achieving whatever like love interest that was going to fulfill me because it was like the work and the career and the school was just like it came naturally.
Natural. Mhm.
So what instead do I focus most of my energy on is the deficit,
That
which is my love life.
that, Jessica, yeah. Just
And being the overachiever, you're like, okay, we said this. I can do all these things in a blink of an eye in
this
work and career, and I got an MBA at 23. Like, but this other thing, I know with my career and my work, effort oftentimes equals reward there. As much time as I spend, like, I will get something, and it has proven true if you look at my track record. Why? And this is go back to your question, like, how do you balance? To be honest, I'm still trying to figure it out because
yeah.
when you do lean into the deficit, when you do give more of your time and energy there, in love, effort does not equal
It's not
necessarily
the
reward.
outcome.
Yeah, it's not
Doesn't
an algorithm.
the
It's
outcome.
two people. So that to me, the balance is still an equation, girl. I am trying to figure out because I want to be able to lean into my work and career and see success, but I don't want to have to just like push all of that aside and be so involved in my love life to where I don't care about this anymore, and
Mhm.
right now that is what I'm trying to figure out. I don't know if there's a perfect balance. Maybe it's like, the scales tip and sway, but
I think it's where you are, and I think it's what your priority is at that point.
that, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think there is. What you're saying is there is no perfect balance. I think, when we think about it and we've had these conversations, we're like, okay, we're bosses. We have MBAs, like young in your career, you bossed it up. Same, when I was young in my career and all these things. And then we sit around with our wine and we're like, this love life is a shit show, right? And but I think it's okay because I think it's a part of our journey. And I had someone that I was seeing, and he said something to me that actually took me aback. Now, right, wrong, and different of where we were, but he said to me, he said, Amber, you're a fixer.
Mm-hmm.
You're goal oriented, and from all that, you're great. He was like, but that doesn't work in love.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard for me to hear, especially for where we were, because I was like, shut the fuck up, motherfucker.
Right.
Tell me this, right? But taking away the messenger and listening to the message of it all, like he was right. And what I realized is because I am goal oriented and I try to take the same capabilities and competencies, right? That
Take your little matrix, your little model.
my little matrix and then overlay it into the relationship. And I'm like, but I did this and I did this and I did this. But what I realized is because of that, we ignore all of the red flags in a relationship that we probably shouldn't be in, or relationships because of those things. And it's something that we have to watch out for and understand that, it can be a priority. A relationship can be your priority at that point where you are in your life. But I think that we make space, and I think that we bend, and I think that we say, well, if they have a Jessika or they have an Amber, how can they lose? How can you lose? And then you look around and they're fucking losing. And you're like, if you were Jess, would have listened to me.
Right.
If you just, and so, but then that's when you take yourself out of it. You take your ego out of it. You understand where you are and understand what's right for you. But I also want to give space to you and give space to myself and give space to those that are listening today. If you are one that is a fixer or empathetic or, goal oriented, because there was a video I was watching and it was about Michelle Obama and Barack. And I was like, oh, I got to share this with Jess because I feel like this is us. Yeah. So, and if you've heard it, just go with me. But it was when they were still in presidency, or Barack was still in presidency, and they were doing some touring. And they were in a town, and they're like, I'm hungry. It was like kind of late at night. And they're like, well, let's go to one of the restaurants, like kind of far away, because obviously they have to do protocol and stuff like that. So they went to this kind of, like, I guess maybe a smaller restaurant or a hole in the wall restaurant kind of place. And they sit down to eat, and, it's fabulous. And the owner comes out and he's like, hey, the chef would love to meet Michelle. And so Michelle goes to the back there for a while, comes back out and sits down and is telling the table, like, that was my ex. That was my ex who was the chef. And, kind of talk about what a small world it is. And so Barack says to her, well, imagine if you would have married him, then you would be the owner of this lovely restaurant. And what she said to him was, imagine if I married him, because he would be the president of the United States. Wow. And I said, oh, that's what I'm talking about, right? Like, ambitious boss women and understanding and owning, even in the intersectionality of relationships, of it's okay to actually feel like if you have a Jessika and you have an Amber, that you're going to boss up, because that's what we do. We take what we have and we're going to always multiply it, and we're always going to make it better. So I love the fact that she stood in her power, even with the president of the United States, who's her husband, said, no, I got you here.
How do you view, because as I hear you talk, I think about, okay, so this overarching theme of work and life balance. Life involves love. So you go down to the next layer. And of course, but personal development and health and mental wellness, all those things. But within the love bracket, again, balance comes to mind again. So you saying, you're typically a fixer, which I would qualify myself as the same
Mm-hmm.
fixer, and that might, also have some synonyms with giver,
Yeah.
doer,
Mm-hmm.
being all of those ers.
Right.
I in my career and work life, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
underline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I tend to do the same thing in my love relationships.
Mm.
So if we just think about like the house of what love is, right?
Yeah.
You might contribute as being a fixer, doer, giver,
Mm-hmm.
but that you mentioned ego. And I think about, okay, is it that I am just too, full of myself? Am I too confident? Am I too cocky that I feel as though when we come to the balance of the relationship, I gotta bear all of it. I'm
Mm.
gonna be the doer. If push comes to shove, I'm gonna be the one to execute. I'm gonna be the one to strategize and think about and suggest and do and all the things.
Yeah.
But do we ever think about what they're doing, what our partner should be offering so that the scales are balanced? And so there's balance in love relationships that
Mhm.
as a doer, I wonder too for you, like, have you ever taken a glance back to think about, well, what I know being a doer and a giver and a fixer is what I naturally inclined to do. Is that necessarily right or fair to my partner?